Elite is dead. Scam citizen. No man's lie. Gamers are getting increasingly jaded. It's something I've not really discussed yet, but recent comments on Elite Dangerous videos really do strike a point home. It's a trend happening right across gaming in general. Perhaps it's understandable. After all, there's a lot to be justifiably cynical about. I mean, where to even start? Unreasonable or greedy microtransactions, over-bloated retail prices, buggy, broken games, terrible game design. There's an endless list of problems. But there's also another problem. Some gamers are slow to forget and even slower to forgive. And on the other end of the spectrum entirely, there's also those white knights who defend their chosen brand or franchise no matter what. And we haven't yet even discussed the trolls. All in all, it's an unpleasant, toxic mix that has become increasingly difficult to navigate. It's also a very complex subject to discuss here in a YouTube video, but I wanted to give it a shot, so let's see how those comments go. So, where do we start? Well, I'll start with what prompted this video. Yesterday's video on Elite Dangerous, like many other Elite videos, gained a huge number of negative, cynical and otherwise unimpressed comments aimed at the game. Now, I don't have issue with this. In fact, broadly speaking, I do agree with many of the points those comments raise. However, it does highlight a wider problem. The video itself was generally positively focused. I discussed recent interesting in-game events. I highlighted some really nice community interaction from the game's community management team. Now, what's interesting to me about all of this is that by and large, people did not react cynically towards the events or the community team. Instead, people spoke repeatedly about their disappointment with Elite's failed potential, along with Frontier's past mistakes on the game. Further comments highlighted that more than a few people are simply not happy with what Elite has become. It's a subject I talked about previously in the video called Shelf Life of a Space Game. The point was that when an MMO or live service game reaches a certain age, it enters what I called its sunset years, a time where the game doesn't really significantly grow its audience base. Instead, it focuses on its current core player base. The problem here is that the interests of the current player base don't always match the interests of the original player base. It's a period of time then where a game moves beyond its golden years, where it has moved past its best before date, yet often it still remains a quality title. This has happened to many games, all the way from Ultima Online to World of Warcraft and beyond. It's also happened to EVE Online, although that game may now be passing into another phase entirely, one which has the potential of decline in both interest and quality. Anyway, all of this to say that, in my opinion, 2022 marked the year that Elite passed into its sunset years. It's not a dead game, not by any means and far from it, but it is a game where a lot of its original audience has left, and many of those for justified reasons. The Odyssey update wasn't what they wanted, and in my opinion, Frontier generally treated the game in a poor way. People moved on. Likewise, Frontier and Elite has also moved on though. The game is no longer what it was, but it is still something interesting and it retains a certain quality. It's something that still appeals to plenty of people. Right there, that is the rift. It's the rift between the new and the old, and it's one that spills out constantly into the comments and discussions we see about the game. There is a danger here though of being too superficial about this particular perspective. It's not simply a case that old players have moved on whilst new players are staying. It's not that black and white. But there is a rift. It's an ill-defined, vague line. On one side, people dislike what Elite has become, its missed potential, whilst others actually enjoy it. There's also a camp of people, through poor judgment or otherwise, who fail to see how the game has changed. Now, I don't want to focus on this rift too much. There's little to no need to get into the ins and outs of it, but it's enough to say that it exists, and I think most people can actually see it, that it does exist. And it's a rift that isn't unique to Elite. We see it in almost all games, especially games of a certain age. Would you believe that there are still people out there who actively are hostile towards No Man's Sky? that they feel that regardless of the games receiving over 20 quality updates and 6 full years of non-stop development, that these people still will neither forgive nor forget the messed up launch, that there's still some anger from people about what they feel are Sean Murray's lies. Yes, the launch of No Man's Sky was bad, and perhaps, maybe, there were some lies, but Hello Games are not mass murderers. Time to move on, perhaps. CD Projekt Red find themselves in a similar situation. Cyberpunk 2077 was undoubtedly a failure of a launch. Personally, to this day, I still think it's not a very good game, and for a variety of reasons that perhaps I might get to into another video. But to be angry at CD Projekt Red after all this time and all these updates and fixes, it creates a toxic rift and an unpleasant environment. Of course, this is the internet, right? It's just the way things are. Well, yes, although regarding that too, the attitudes on the internet have changed dramatically over the decades. The internet of the 2000s and the type of people that you'd find on there, I guess mostly nerds, is very different to the mainstream audience that the internet has today. And that brings with it its very own set of issues. But focusing back on gaming, to be perfectly reasonable, there are releases that are problematic, many of them in fact. An example, Battlefield 2042, which, well, it just plain sucks. Publishers appear to give lip service with these types of games, saying that they understand the problems and the community reaction, the general dislike, yet these same publishers continue to create the very same problems again and again. So it's really hard to believe, at least for some people, that all of this isn't intentional, or at least, well, let's say ignorant. Star Citizen, meanwhile, is a different example, a different kettle of fish. It constantly gets called a scam citizen. It's hard to see where the game is heading. On the one hand, it makes a ton of money whilst remaining playable with some of the best environments and vehicle design in the industry. On the other hand, it sort of feels like a very empty and shallow title with its gameplay. CIG just keep on trucking on meanwhile. Gamers then react to all of the multitude of issues surrounding these and other titles, and thus the rift in gaming communities continues to get fed. Now, when it comes to Elite Dangerous specifically, Frontier are in a bit of a weird hybrid situation. Odyssey was very clearly a failed launch, it was a mess of an update. Whilst Frontier did release a number of patches to try and fix it, they also belatedly communicated with the player base. But to this day, in my opinion at least, Frontier did nowhere near enough to fix the fundamentals with Odyssey. And I still feel it remains a poorly designed update with poorly executed game mechanics. I suspect Frontier will never fix or improve upon those. Yet what Frontier have done is move on. They have fed an ongoing story, along with the relevant lore. They've released tie-in updates and in-game content. They've also picked up pace with the quality of their community interactions. The current community management team really are pushing out all the stops. Plus, there's more to come. Does this mean that I like Odyssey? Nope. Does it mean that all of the Elite problems are now forgotten? Well, far from it. What it does show is that Frontier are moving forwards. It seems they are, to all intents and purposes, ignoring many of the fundamental problems the game has, but simultaneously moving towards fixing other issues. And so some people are happy, and others aren't. And don't get me wrong, I'm not making excuses for Frontier here. I'm merely highlighting that ongoing rift with the community. It's that now classic rift in video game communities, and sometimes it's one that becomes all the greater as a title ages. It really is a big problem right across the games industry. At this point, related topic, I'm pretty sure that some people will be pointing out that there is a key point I've missed here. That point is YouTubers and Twitch streamers certainly have a massive part to play in all of this, both for Elite as well as gaming in general, and I entirely agree with that point. For all games, there's content creators that are pure beacons of positivity, to the point perhaps of being sycophants. I'd argue that these, at least in my opinion, are worse than the naysayers, and their blind positivity is not at all constructive. There's also the toxic naysayers who never see the good in anything at all. No matter what a company does, these people will constantly crap on it. And then there's the ones who just want to get on and enjoy their hobby and content creation and discuss both the ups and downs in intelligent terms. Naturally, content creators have a broader reach, and all us content creators feed into this cycle regardless of whether our intents are good, bad or otherwise. Now, regardless of whether we are discussing players, industry observers or content creators, whether we're talking about developers, publishers or investors, it seems to me there is a fundamental point that can be made here. When discussing all of this, many fail to intelligently raise their own points. The thesis they have seems to be this: if you don't like a point someone is making, then directly attack or demean that point, and if that fails, then attack the person making the point. The obvious counterpoint to this, and perhaps the preferred option, would to be instead make thoughtful and intelligent arguments, raise and address concerns in a manner that is hopefully insightful, respect others' opinions. But who am I kidding? This is the internet. In the current state of the games industry then, there's a lot of blame that can go around. Publishers, developers, companies, players, observers, critics, the media, journalists, content creators, all of these and more play a part in the ongoing gaming rifts. None of this, by the way, is limited to just gaming. The exact same trends can be seen in all forms of entertainment. Objective garbage is portrayed as quality, and quality goes unseen by many. In between, there's a lot of toxicity going on between the writers, the creators, as well as the fans. I don't see any solution to any of this. I'm not trying to raise a solution. At this point, I'm probably just venting. But hopefully, some of you may find the topic interesting. There's also a lot more that can perhaps be said, and maybe we'll leave that for a future video. Meanwhile, let me know how you feel about the topic. Do you feel that gaming specifically and entertainment in general is in a weird place right now? Would you say there's never been so much quality entertainment? Or perhaps you feel there's never been quite so much trash media? What are your thoughts on the general daily reaction to all of this that we see day to day? Do let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.